Revolution Radio proudly presents, live from the heart of the Blue Ridge, Roanoke, Virginia. It's the Just Bernard Show with host Bernard Alvarez. Join Bernard as he shares topics that reveal the real matrix and empower your human experience, including world liberty, the esoteric, suppressed technologies, spiritual ascension, and human consciousness. Humanity has awakened, and our time has come to realize our full potential. And now, live from the Star City, your host, Bernard Alvarez.
Today, it turns out, Hillary is going to be our last guest, and what's so cool is Hillary, I don't know if it's cool, I'm sure she thinks it's cool. She recently left radio a few months ago after 13 years on the radio. So if you don't know who Hillary Raimo is, she is an award-winning artist. She is the author of 3 books. She did do 13 years of radio as well. She is a Reiki master and teacher of Usui and Karuna. So welcome back to the show, Hillary Raimo. How are you today?
Well, hello, Bernard. Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. What a great accomplishment you've treated us all to all these years. I have to acknowledge that and say thank you so much for your service to the world.
Oh, thank you, Hillary. And back at you, I'll tell you. I don't think we have a choice, though. Do you not? You know?
Well, I don't think we do, really. I think we wish we did, but we really don't when it comes to things like this because it turns out that voice of passion, which lives deep inside of us, tends to keep going and going and going until we align with what we're really meant to do. So some that changes and we go through phases and, congratulations on being able to close the chapter.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you. So, Hillary, let's pick up where we left off, I guess. So, last time you were on was probably actually you were on my webcast, and it was probably, 2 years ago now? You had just come back from No Dapple, and you were actually at the encampment there for a little while, weren't you?
Yes, I was actually. That was the last time you and I got on the air together. I had just come back from Standing Rock Camp in North Dakota, and we had a great show to, had a chance to talk about some of the things that I had seen. I was there for about 3 days and had an opportunity to interview people and get some video footage and take some fantastic photographs. So it was quite an extraordinary experience, and I was really happy to have someone like yourself be interested in hearing my perspectives on it.
Oh man, well, thank you so much for doing that. I mean, it was, I had wanted to go there myself, and I couldn't leave because I was working. And trying to find people on the ground was very difficult because, it was very difficult to actually speak to the actual Native Americans that were there, the indigenous people that were there. And I know we were trying to be respectful and honorable of the ceremonies and whatnot that was going there. So to have somebody that was there, even looking from the outside as an observer, was great. And how was that experience for you on a personal level?
Oh, it was fantastic. I mean, it was really quite extraordinary to be part of something so fantastic and, such a grand marker in time, really, what happened. And so few people talk about it. And it was on a lot of people's minds because it wasn't getting quite enough media attention at the time. And so I felt it was really important to go. I was very called to go. So I packed up and went with a friend of mine, and we drove from Albuquerque, New Mexico, up to North Dakota, which was an amazing thing in itself because of such a beautiful part of our country, really, to drive through. So it was quite extraordinary. For me as an artist, it was great to grab some photographs along the way too. So I documented what I could. And when I got into the camp, it was a matter of approaching people with respect and standing in your integrity and really just knowing what was appropriate, what wasn't, and doing the best you could. I'm not a Native American person, so it was really special for me to be able to walk in there and have those conversations And I really appreciated the perspectives that they shared. And we had tribes from all over come together in this one extraordinary place. And it was such a moment, Bernard. It was like, oh my God, am I really here? Am I really having this conversation with these amazing, beautiful people? And it was quite humbling. And so when I left, drove back to New Mexico and then flew back to New York, there was a lot of processing that went on. And actually, after, I think it was around that time that I decided I was going to wrap up my radio career too, believe it or not. I had just launched Yin Radio TV as my own network. And I was in the process of transferring content over to the platform and getting ready to really utilize YouTube when things started to really change for online content and all. So I had become kind of disenchanted with the online radio business as it was. So when I came back and I had this beautiful, incredible, enriched experience, I really wanted to switch gears and head in a different direction. So I did. And ever since, it's just been a wonderful thing. It's like I really had to learn how to close that chapter down, know when everything was pointing to the no, say no, and not just keep going because I feel obligated. I really, it's a great big lesson to learn how to wrap something up and close the chapter on something, wouldn't you say? I mean, you're doing it now, and I did this 2 years ago. So
yeah,
that was part of what
it's letting your baby grow up and letting them be their own person, I guess, in a way. I mean, I don't know how it was for you, but it's like ending a relationship, but not on a bad note. It's just like, okay, now you've grown up. I've done all I can do. Now it's time to move on.
Yeah. And I decided to write a book. So what I did to honor my time on the air, my run, my legacy, whatever you want to call it, was I spent 1.5 years or so putting together a transcript book, Hillary Raimo Show transcripts, and they were conversations on technology, time travel, ETs, consciousness, 9/11, all sorts of things that I really felt were important and could be valuable to a reader who now is reading a transcript versus listening to a radio show. And the information that I chose to put into my book really gives a really great, broad overview of my time on the air. And I kind of wrote it for like my progeny, when my grandchildren come, my great-grandchildren come, they can say, who was this crazy lady? What was she doing with her life? And I can hand them a book and say, well, this was a part of it anyway. And you might get to know some things that are going on in the world. So I wrote this book, put it together, released it last spring. And I've done a lot of great interviews and conversations over the content of it. So it was a really nice way to wrap up my radio career, and I'm really glad I decided to do it.
That's great. And I have your book in my hand, actually, right now. I'm going to show it to everybody. Actually, I just had a picture up there, but this is her book in real 3D. And I have to, I'm so jealous, or envious, I should say. Your first chapter is with David Icke, and that was probably one of the only people who I wanted on my show that hadn't been able to come on my show. He was always too busy. So you used him as chapter 1. Was there any reason that you wanted to use him as chapter 1 to get it out of the way, or?
Yeah, no. The layout of the chapters is very deliberate. And I chose David Icke for the first one because David was pretty instrumental in getting my radio career going. Oh. In 2005, I started on AM terrestrial talk radio here in upstate New York. And I did that for about 3 years until I switched over to Achieve Radio for the remainder of my time on the air. And during that time, one of my spiritual teachers that I was working with at the time, she suggested that I read through David Icke's body of work. And I said, okay. And I went and got all the books at that point and got them all ready. And I was horrified when I opened the cover and started to read this material. I was like, what's going on? Why would she tell me to read this stuff? This stuff is so out of my frame of reference at that point. But because the recommendation had come from who it came from, I continued through his body of work, really took a good look at it. Some things I agreed with, some things I didn't resonate with, but the things that I did, I ordered source books and read the source books to really see, is this information correct and real? I mean, it's something that's becoming more and more important these days, is to recognize when information is really legit versus just something someone made up somewhere and threw together to be a clickbait, right? So here I was going through this, change and uplift, and moving around in my life and not sure quite what was going to be next. This was right before I started my radio show. And when I was going through David Icke's work, it was such I guess, an opening of my psyche, if you will, really, to start to see the world in a different place. And, he's got some outrageous theories, but he's got a lot more in there too. He predicted the flu shot agenda. He predicted the microchip agenda. If you go back to his early work, you can see very clearly that he was concerned about nanotechnology and vaccines and all the things that we really don't hear too much about anymore lately, because I believe content is being highly censored and removed systematically off the digital worlds. But David Icke was really instrumental in helping me to open up my perspective to see a bigger picture that I had not seen before, so I could appreciate what that was. And so I decided to make him chapter 1, because he was really the impetus that pushed me out into the world to start my radio show. And at the time, he wasn't as popular as he is today. He was a little less well known. It was easier to book him. It was easier to talk to him. So when I started the radio show, of course, I invited him on and was thrilled that he agreed to come on. And over the years, we ended up doing 4 shows together. And each time he came on the air, I was really interested in what his thoughts were on what was going on at that particular time. What were the headlines? What were we facing as a culture? What were the larger cycles? How did it tie in with industry growth and agendas? And he was really open and free in talking about these things, which made it really a fun, interesting show, because it was relevant to the listeners at the time. So David had a really brilliant way of tying in a lot of things that were going on that maybe we needed to see a little bit more into.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I really appreciate about him, is that he kept up with the current events and doesn't just hold on to one quote unquote conspiracy theory and keep ramming it down your throat like so many people out there do. No names. And he's always been very eloquent, and I like the fact that he has the ability of not being necessarily divisive, but just sharing the information, no matter how outrageous it is.
Yeah, and a lot of it really is starting to come out as less outrageous and more reality. Oh, yeah. He called a lot of the church pedophilia rings. He was talking about a lot of that stuff way back when it was considered conspiracy, and now it really we're watching it open up onto the world platform as fact and things that we really need to deal with. So he was calling it before people were comfortable talking about it. I don't know if anybody's ever really comfortable talking about certain things that he talks about, but at least he's doing it, and it gives motivation to other people to stand up and talk about the things that maybe are a little more uncomfortable for people to talk about. And we really need to have these conversations so that we know what's real and what's not real. Otherwise, we leave it up to headlines or news or whatever our sources are to give it to us, and we make an opinion and go about ourselves and the world accordingly. And sometimes it's wrong.
Lots of times it's wrong, but yeah.
Sometimes it's wrong.
I would say, who did it come from, and how much did they get paid to say that? And most of the time, you'll know if they're getting paid a lot of money to say it's wrong.
Well, I want to throw into that mix. I want to mention also that alternative media over the last decade or so has really done a great service to humanity in being able to bring out information that otherwise may normally just not get out there or not be discussed or not be heard. We have done a lot of good, the people that have worked hard in this industry, to get information out. And unfortunately, over the last few years, especially with leadership changes and the things that we've had going on, the content that's available is starting to shift, and tech leaders are starting to kind of police content or take people down if they don't like their content. So we really have to remember there was a time when information was ripe and available. And if it was anything, it was overwhelming because there was so much of it. And we all had the opportunity to swim around in it for a while to make up different opinions and perspectives of the world. And I attest to the power of alternative media to doing that.
Oh, here. I couldn't agree with you more. I feel that especially during the early years, I guess in the 2000s or whatnot, like I guess when we started and when Revolution Radio started, we were able to talk about everything and actually discuss it. I mean, unfortunately now it's become, how shall we say, I don't want to say centralized, but niched. It's almost as if a lot of the alternative media now has become niched, especially, like you said, especially now with the new leadership, that we're focusing on niche aspects. And I will say it is positive in many ways that we did have the ability to swim around in all this information. And for example, for me, I started off my whole entrance into the alternative media world were the chemtrails, and having people come on and talk about chemtrails and whatnot. And of course, then we went into the whole secret society thing and 9/11, et cetera, and more and more and more. And for me, after all those years swimming around, I kind of started realizing, the greatest conspiracy to me, especially, and we're seeing it now in the media, is the suppression of consciousness. And that's kind of like, I guess you could call that, I turned that into my niche and into my specialty. But what do you feel about moving into niches and finding your place in this crazy swimming soup of alternative facts?
It's a good question. How do you distinguish what belongs to you versus what belongs to somebody else? Well, I think we have to become comfortable with silence and being alone. And we have to be okay with meditation, and we have to be okay with talking about the realities of consciousness and how they enable us to connect not only with ourselves, but with everything and other people especially. So we have to open up to the realities that these kind of connections, these super connections, consciousness is really the way we are able to do that. And consciousness is also the key to allowing ourselves to think out of the box, to have aha moments, to be inspired, and to really have our passion fueled in order to be able to align with what we're supposed to be doing anyway. And as we learn how to listen to the synchronicities that happen to us better and better, and as we learn how to sit still enough to have a conversation with somebody who's crossed our path or perhaps keeps crossing our path, these things don't just happen randomly. They happen for reasons. And if you don't start seeking that, then you're just going to probably fall down and bump your knees along the way and, just have a really difficult time and keep coming up against the same challenges over and over and over again until your consciousness realizes the pattern that you're doing and triggers a series of events to perhaps change it, or you have that aha moment that pulls you out of that repetitive dysfunctional cycle, whatever that may be, and you start to see that there's ability for growth. And, right now, what I see when I look out onto the collective platforms, because I watch, I observe, I track, that's who I am, it's part of what I do. So when I look at what's going on and I say, hey, are people really remembering how to discern their own thoughts from the thoughts of others? And are they able to really go quiet enough to allow the necessary integration that comes from that work? I don't know. I think some people are very, very ready for that and very capable.
Well, let's hold that thought. We're going to pick up this discussion on the other side of the break. We're going to be taking a short commercial break right now. Everyone, we'll be back with Hillary Raimo in just a few moments. We'll be right back. You had what was it, a workshop you went to, or what was going on? Tell us a little bit about your visit.
Sure, yeah. Well, way back when I first began radio, I was asked to do a documentary from Path 11 Productions on the afterlife. And while I was filming for that, we came together, the other cast members and I got to know each other. And Tom Campbell, who is a former NASA nuclear physicist who now talks about consciousness and has written a fabulous trilogy called My Big Toe, My Big Theory of Everything. And we had some fantastic conversations years and years and years ago. And we went to London to do the London premiere for the documentary. And him and I were the only cast members that could make it for the Q&A. So we had a great time with a great audience. And all the women understood me and all the men understood him. And we were like the two halves of the brain talking. So fast forward 10 years or so, actually. I was invited to come and as an author to do a book signing and share some of my work with the group. And we had about 90 people from all over the world. We had probably over 20 countries represented. It was fantastic. And Tom did an immersive where he has put together some consciousness experiments and binary beats, and we were working with the beats and doing meditation and remote viewing, and he was teaching us how to do some of this stuff. He worked with Bob Monroe from the Monroe Institute years and years ago, back in the 1970s, and he was one of the original kind of out-of-body explorers, and he's been doing this for a very long time. So the fact that he has his nuclear physicist background and that he's moved into consciousness really does a great thing for tying in spirituality with science. So we got to listen to a bunch of his lectures and experiment with some of the binary beats and do some meditations and meet a lot of great people from around the world. So I came home from that this past weekend, really inspired to do some artwork. Actually, I work in the world now as an artist. So I was getting into some paintings and getting ready to do your show, Bernard, and really kind of talk about some of these fantastic topics that if we were only putting as much energy into these kinds of things as we do with other distractive type things, we would be so much better off, I think.
Oh man, you can say that again. Again, back to consciousness, our thoughts, what are we thinking, what are we creating, and I saw that on your notes you wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of manifesting beauty in this world, and I just happened to name today's episode, the importance of manifesting beauty in this world. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that? Why do you feel that way? How do we manifest beauty in the world, and what are you inspired to share with us on that today?
Well, I think it's a really important topic to discuss, and we really need to pour more energy into it. And finding beauty is really a matter of opinion, because what one person finds beautiful may not be beautiful to another person. So beauty is specific to each individual, and we all have different ideas of what's beautiful or what we find beautiful. And the really neat thing about that is that's okay. Like whatever you find beautiful is what you need to go find. And whatever I find beautiful is what I need to go find. And so we become seekers looking out into the world. When I'm walking around out in nature looking for photographs to take from my artwork, people ask me sometimes, well, how do you know you have the right shot? And I said, well, I can feel it, can't you? And they kind of look at me confused for a moment, because then I quickly realized that even all artists don't necessarily find beauty the same way. And as I've navigated the art worlds for the last few years, and I run my local art association, I've realized that artists really still struggle. It's kind of like a spiritual path, if you will, really. They're looking for ways of accepting themselves as artists and moving their way through perceiving things and how we recreate that, really. But thoughts really are so easy to discuss because we all have them, right? You have them, I have them, Treva has them, we all have them. Everybody listening has thoughts, everybody's thinking something right now. But being able to determine what are your own thoughts versus thoughts of other people or other situations or belief systems or things that we have accumulated over our lifetime of experience, we tend to develop forms of belief systems, and beauty is included with a belief system. What we believe is beautiful is a belief system. Not everybody will find the same thing beautiful because it's individual, which then proves really that consciousness is able to synchronize individually with each one of our perceptions and how we see the world. And so when we tend to find something beautiful together, it's a real magical moment, because it's like that rare thing, that rare aha moment that you have when you find something beautiful together with a group of people or a population or even just your partner. But it's a magical thing. And what beauty does to the brain is what like pleasure does to the brain or hate does to the brain. It creates a special biochemistry. And when we see something beautiful, we might get goosebumps, chicken skin, sometimes people call it, or we have a gasp like, oh, that's so beautiful. We know we have some kind of reaction to it. And if you can settle down inside yourself long enough to realize what your specific reaction to beauty is. It'll be a fantastic relationship to nurture, because then you'll find it more often. And for whatever reason, you need to see that beauty. And for whatever reason, you need to somehow translate that into what it means for you. And it opens up a really fantastic inner dialogue.
Absolutely. And not only that, I feel that the more we experience beauty, because you're basically sharing what I would consider experiencing beauty, how your body and your brain react to it. For me, I believe it creates a neural pathway, for lack of a better term. It makes our brain get used to experiencing that sensation. And the more we get used to experiencing that sensation, I would believe that we reverberate that energy out into the world and manifest a better world around us.
Well, it definitely reflects in our work. So whether you're working in an office and you do data entry, or you're working as an artist and you're painting a canvas, or you work, whatever you do, you can then take that feeling and move it forward into whatever it is you're doing or whatever it is you would like to do. People often say to me, oh, I love being around you because you're like a good luck charm. Good things always happen to me when I'm around you. And the first thing I say is, well, okay. That's great. I would hope that would be, thank you very much. That's a great compliment. It's better than saying my life gets worse after I'm around you. God forbid, right? So I don't know. I think there's something to it. There's something to synchronicity, finding beauty and being able to share it with each other that creates such a welcomed plasma ball of protection to the negativity that we're sometimes surrounded with, or that we're objectified to because of what we find our way to, or what we watch, or what we participate in. A lot of people say, I don't watch the news anymore, so I'm not affected by it. I'm like, well, that's funny, because I just saw you post like 10 things on your social media page that have everything to do with what's all over the news and people's opinions. So information can now spread in ways that it has never been able to spread before. And what we're looking at is a massive study of human behavior. And so, whether people are being deviant in their behavior, or conforming or non-conforming, or whatever, we have an ability to be able to study it and watch it like we've never had before. So all of these proclamations are happening about being human and what it means to be a good human or a bad human. And I just think beauty just puts it into a different context, and we're able to find our way out of the confusion much better, because otherwise, a lot of times we're just like hamsters on a hamster wheel, and we don't even realize we're on a hamster wheel until we get off of it. And I think beauty helps to get us off that.
How true. A few years ago, I coined the phrase, and I still use it to this day, a Facebook reactive syndrome. And where people literally react to the post, and it affects their whole day. I've had friends that have been depressed over, for days they'll be depressed over a Facebook debate or argument or something. And don't get me wrong, I do my best to be vigilant as to what I expose my senses to. And every once in a while, I catch myself going through the very same thing of being reactive to what I'm seeing on social media. And so that brings me to something else that you mentioned, is the digital age creating a digital consciousness? And is it going to be a beautiful thing, or, are we just doing the hamster wheel thing that you're talking about?
Well, I brought this question up to Tom Campbell at my recent visit at Lumley Castle. I asked this question to him in our Q&A. And I brought up the idea of how digital advances and technologies are becoming more and more sophisticated. And are we really just looking at the human consciousness being replicated in a digital format? Because there's so many opportunities to study it and create something out of it. And, his answer was really interesting. He said to me, he goes, well, the human being still has the ability to incorporate intuition and a different level of awareness than pretty much any computer will ever be able to do. And then you start to really research this topic. It becomes even more interesting, because then they talk about merging technology with human biology and creating, different landscapes inside the human body that create different responses. I mean, we really have been studied quite well, if you want my opinion on the matter. And the digital age is fast forwarding us in ways that nothing really ever has before. This is all really unknown new territory. I'm 46 years old almost, and I've seen what it's like. I'm still part of that generation that didn't grow up with the connection, didn't grow up with the devices, grew up outside and spent a lot of time in nature and had to actually go over to a friend's house to have any kind of social interaction. Right. Where now kids can just stare at a video game screen and do it with 8 of their friends, or, do their cell phones all day long. And so we really don't know what this is going to breed within the human experience. And if you remote view something called the future data streams, which is what Tom Campbell talks about in his book and his theories, you can actually start to navigate with your imagination and your intellect through these eddies of pockets of data and information where you can start to see what are the possibilities that we might be going into. Some people call it being psychic, some people call it remote viewing, whatever you like to call it is fine, but the fact is that you can still do it. And when I take a look into the future and where we're going, let's say fast forward 50,000 years, what do you see? Do you see a beautiful world? Do you see annihilation? Do you see a combination? Do you see reorganization? It's a really interesting exercise, and I encourage everybody listening to try to do it, where you just get into your meditative state and you project your consciousness fast forward however many years you want to go, and you just try to observe the world around you and what it might look like. And it's really quite interesting because remote viewing is a very real skill. Telepathy is a very real skill. Yeah. You can have I find myself, I have a sister who's very close to me in age, and sometimes we'll be sitting in the room and I'll just answer a question that she didn't actually ask, but she asked it in her head. And she'll look at me and she'll say, "Stop it." I'm like, I can't help it. It just comes in. I don't know. It's just there. Yes, I want to go to lunch. Something very naive and benign, but, it's still there. We can get into the space of each other more easily than we think. And so many people in the new age industries have become afraid of that, or they go through all these bizarre rituals to try to protect themselves, and they project all this stuff all over everybody, when in fact, really, it's just really very simple connection. There really doesn't have to be so complicated. And and the way Tom Campbell puts it, and I keep bringing him up because I'm just coming back from, being immersed in his work for several days. And so it's really one of these things where we have to grow up, he says. And it's true. I mean, I'm growing up a little more every day. You're growing up a little more every day. Everybody else is growing up a little more every day. And nobody stays the same year to year. I mean, we have varied degrees of experience that we go through, things that shape us. Sometimes very traumatic things happen to us, maybe the loss of somebody, or, a new birth to a family. These kind of life moments really do make a difference in changing our perspective and how we see the world and ourselves and others. And we have to be more lenient in allowing that growth rate to be honored and expressed, no matter where we are, who we are, or what we're doing.
Well, that's very, very well said, and I couldn't agree with you more. I find that, we overcomplicate things when it comes to that kind of stuff. We talk about the supernatural as if it's something out there, and quite honestly, it's something that's quite natural within us and is within the human potentiality, and we've just been, back to what I was talking about, the suppression of consciousness. We've been suppressed to all of these things, and people fear it for some reason. And like you said, it's nothing to fear. It's something that we, as a collective, must grow up and grow into and embrace that it is a part of who we are.
I think the world would be a much more beautiful place if this was one of those kind of mainstream thought forms where everybody just accepted the fact that consciousness is real and that it's part of who we are, and that's how we enable all these gifts of being human. Everybody wants superpowers, but nobody wants to claim them, and then everybody wants to stick their head in the sand when it's time to use them. And that's one of the things I've never really understood. And we have been systematically consciousness has been systematically sort of depressed among the populations because it really does free your mind from conditioning and programming. It really does allow you to expand beyond what you think you're supposed to be doing or what you should be doing. And it makes us break the rules a little bit and get out of our comfort zones, if anything, and take a look at our belief structures and reanalyze, well, maybe this one doesn't hold as much weight as it did 2 years ago, or maybe this one is completely obsolete and has to go. Oh, this one's useful, right? So you take inventory of the things that you hold true to yourself and based on your experience, and your own unique wisdom comes out of that. It's refined out of that quite beautifully, actually. And when we allow ourselves to be that wise person, and other people allow us to be that wise person, magic happens, because once you give me permission to share my wisdom, well, then you're given permission to share your wisdom, and so is everybody else around you. And we would be much better off if we actually just listened to each person for the special expression of creation that they really are, versus trying to stick them in categories as to where they belong. Oh, you don't like this, well, I'm going to put you over here. Mm-hmm. That's judgment. Yeah. And the last time I checked, most spiritual programs that you pay lots of money to attend tell you to suspend judgment. But I see a lot of judgment going on, so I'm not sure what's happening.
Oh my goodness, I couldn't. I don't want to say it again, but yes, I do agree. And especially in the spiritual world as well as the alternative media world, there's a lot of judgment going on. And for me, of course, we're not perfect. Even you and I and those of us that have been working on our inner selves for years now, we are going to have moments. But I feel that it's when you can catch yourself in that moment. And not only that, is people get frustrated, for example, when they do catch themselves judging, and suddenly they begin to judge themselves for judging. And then this whole cycle of, oh, I'm a bad person comes in and I can't do this and whatnot. And what would you say to somebody that's going through that? It's like, well, you're trying, good for trying, but you caught it.
Oh, well, what I would say I would use this. I would say, well, if a wolf is out in the forest and it makes the kill to feed its babies and itself so that it doesn't starve and die, does it spend the rest of the afternoon going around, oh my God, I'm so sorry I killed you. I'm so sorry I killed you. No. Nature has this incredible way of keeping the checks and balances in place. And when things become out of balance, that's when chaos and all this stuff starts to happen and confusion. And I think people have to be more lenient, more forgiving of themselves, and they have to stop treating themselves like feeling certain ways is really bad. I mean, as an artist, it's really great fuel for creating a painting or a piece that's coming out of your subconscious, and that includes your anger and your sadness and your grief and all the things that people say are bad and negative and you shouldn't spend too much time in. Well, what's wrong with spending time in it if you need to spend time in it? Maybe the soup of the day is feeling sadness and you need to paint a picture or write something or compose a piece of music or call up a friend and reconnect. I mean, maybe it's used as some form of assistance in helping you to reach out and grow. I mean, that's kind of how it's changed for me. I didn't always see it this way. I used to be one of those new age people that were like, oh, don't get mad. It's so negative. Well, now I see anger as great fuel. And for people who have learned to use their anger as a laser focus versus bringing everything in from the last 20 years and using it as ammunition and throwing it at people and getting really ridiculous, that's healing. That's a healing that needs to take place. But when people have righteous anger, or they have a laser focused anger where you did this wrong and I'm angry about it. Well, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a normal reaction to something that's happened to you. And maybe the way of correcting that is to making amends or to get retribution for that. So there are really grown up ways of dealing with certain things that we would normally reject and say is unspiritual or not of the light. I mean, we have to change our language a little bit and start seeing things differently so we can adapt and accommodate the ever-changing environments around us.
And you said it best, and thank you so much for that. We are out of time. My goodness, I can't believe it already. I could have gone on this topic for a little longer, but thank you, Hillary. You were the last guest of the Just Bernard Show. Thank you so much. We made history today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. And again, congratulations on your great accomplishment and knowing when to close the door on it. I see great things for you, Bernard. Thank you so much for all the work you've done.
I really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Hillary. And don't forget, everybody, the Hillary Raimo show transcripts is available. I'm sure major book sellers like Amazon, etc. Hillary?
Yes, Amazon, Amazon UK, Barnes & Noble, and Lulu.
Right on. Okay, everybody. Well, that was our last guest of the Just Bernard Show run. We will be back next week for our finale where Trevor and I are going to reflect over our work over the last 11 years, and we will be taking your questions live. I love you, and have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.